Have you ever noticed something strange? Two people can earn the exact same income, live in the same neighborhood, even have similar opportunities. Yet 5 years later, one has built financial freedom while the other is still struggling to make ends meet. Most people assume the difference is luck. Some blame education. Others say it's about working harder. But what if the real difference started long before either person saw a bigger paycheck? What if wealth is something you practice before it becomes something you possess? That idea might sound unrealistic at first. After all, how can someone act wealthy when they're worried about paying bills? But here's something fascinating from psychology. Your brain is constantly looking for evidence that confirms who you believe you are. Neuroscientists call this predictive processing. Your subconscious builds patterns based on your identity, and those patterns quietly influence the decisions you make every single day. In other words, you don't simply behave according to your circumstances. You behave according to who you believe you are. And over time, those behaviors create your circumstances. That's why today's video isn't about pretending to be rich or buying things you can't afford. It's about building the identity that naturally produces wealth. Because when your identity changes, your habits change. When your habits change, your decisions change. And eventually, your reality begins to change with them. But there's one mistake almost everyone makes when trying to act wealthy. We'll come back to that in a moment because understanding it can completely change how you approach manifestation. Let's begin with something surprisingly simple. Your environment doesn't just influence your mood. It influences your identity. Think about how you feel walking into a clean, organized hotel lobby compared to stepping into a cluttered storage room. Nothing about your bank account changes in those few seconds. But your emotional state does. Your brain is constantly absorbing signals from your surroundings and asking one question. What kind of person lives like this? That's why your appearance matters. Not because expensive clothes create wealth, but because your daily presentation sends repeated messages to your subconscious. Many people assume looking successful requires spending thousands of dollars. Actually, it's almost the opposite. When researchers study first impressions, they consistently find that people respond more strongly to signs of order, cleanliness, and confidence than to obvious displays of luxury. A simple, well-fitted outfit often communicates more confidence than designer logos covering every inch of clothing. So instead of asking, "How can I look rich?" ask yourself, "How can I look intentional?" Those are very different questions. Intentional people polish their shoes. They keep their workspace organized. They wear clean clothes. They take care of themselves. Not because they're trying to impress strangers, but because every small action reinforces a powerful identity. I am someone who values myself. And here's where manifestation meets psychology. Every repeated behavior strengthens neural pathways in the brain. This is called neuroplasticity. The more often you behave like someone who respects themselves, the easier those behaviors become. Eventually, your brain stops seeing them as effort. They become part of who you are. That's exactly how habits form. Small actions, repeated consistently, until they become automatic. Oh, but here's the interesting part. The same process works in reverse. If you constantly neglect yourself, wear wrinkled clothes, leave your surroundings chaotic, or tell yourself you'll start taking care of yourself when you have more money, your subconscious receives that message too. It quietly reinforces the belief, "I'm not there yet." And whatever identity you repeatedly confirm, your brain works hard to maintain. That's why manifestation isn't simply about positive thinking. It's about creating repeated experiences that support the identity you want to develop. Now, before you misunderstand this doesn't mean buying luxury brands on a credit card. It doesn't mean pretending you're a millionaire. In fact, those behaviors often come from insecurity rather than abundance. Real abundance looks surprisingly calm. It's thoughtful. It's intentional. It's simple. And simplicity communicates confidence because confident people don't feel the need to constantly prove their value. Now, there's another area where identity quietly reveals itself. It's something most of us do hundreds of times every week without noticing. Our conversations. Listen carefully to how people talk about money. Some conversations revolve around discounts, saving 50 cents, complaining about rising prices, or constantly explaining how little something cost. There's nothing wrong with being financially responsible. But if every financial conversation reinforces scarcity, your attention stays locked onto scarcity, and what you repeatedly focus on becomes more mentally available. Psychologists call this the reticular activating system, or RAS. Think of it as your brain's filtering system. Every day, millions of pieces of information compete for your attention. Your RAS decides what deserves your focus based largely on your beliefs and priorities. If your mind is constantly searching for evidence of limitation, guess what it finds? More limitation. But what happens when you begin expanding the conversations you have around money? Not bragging, not comparing, simply becoming comfortable discussing investing, business, innovation, financial growth, and opportunities. That small shift begins teaching your brain something new. Money isn't something to fear. It's simply a resource that people create, exchange, and grow. And once your relationship with money changes, your decisions begin changing too. But there's one final identity shift. So, what is that final identity shift? It's learning to value your time more than tiny amounts of money. At first, that might sound backwards. If I don't have much money, you might think, shouldn't I be trying to save every dollar I can? Being financially responsible is important. This isn't about wasting money or living beyond your means. It's about recognizing something psychology has shown us for decades. Your decisions reveal what you truly value. And over time, those decisions become your identity. Imagine two people. The first person spends 3 hours driving across town to save $10 on a purchase. The second person spends those same 3 hours learning a high-income skill, reading about investing, improving their health, or building a side project. Both made a choice. One invested in a short-term gain. The other invested in long-term growth. Neither choice changes their bank account overnight. But repeat those choices for a year. Then 5 years. Now you're looking at two completely different lives. This is where manifestation becomes incredibly practical. Your subconscious isn't only listening to your affirmations. It's watching your priorities. Every day your brain asks, what does this person's behavior suggest is important? If you repeatedly sacrifice your future to protect tiny comforts today, your subconscious adapts to that pattern. But if you consistently invest your time in learning, creating, and growing, even when results aren't immediate, you begin reinforcing a very different identity. I am someone who creates value. And value is what wealth naturally follows. Think about the most financially successful people you know. Whether they're entrepreneurs, executives, creators, or skilled professionals, they all understand one powerful truth. Money can often be earned again. Time cannot. That's why many successful people happily pay someone else to clean their house, mow their lawn, or deliver groceries. It's not because they're lazy. It's because they've learned that protecting time allows them to focus on activities that generate far greater value. Now, before you say, well, I can't afford to outsource anything, that's okay. This principle isn't really about hiring people. It's about changing the way you think. Instead of asking, how can I save $5? Ask, how can I become the kind of person who earns $50 more? Notice how different those questions feel. One comes from scarcity. The other comes from growth. Psychologists call this a growth-oriented mindset. Instead of obsessing over what you're losing, your attention shifts toward what you're capable of creating. And remember what we discussed earlier about the reticular activating system? Your brain filters reality based on what it believes matters. When your focus shifts from avoiding loss to creating opportunity, your brain begins noticing ideas, connections, resources, and possibilities that were always there, but previously ignored. It's almost like buying a new car. Suddenly, you start seeing that model everywhere. The cars didn't magically appear. Your awareness changed. The same thing happens with opportunity. When your identity changes, your perception changes. When your perception changes, your decisions change. And those decisions slowly reshape your reality. This is why manifestation isn't about magically attracting money from the universe. It's about becoming someone who naturally recognizes, pursues, and creates opportunities that your previous identity overlooked. That's a much more empowering way to see it, because it places the power back where it belongs, with you. Here's a simple exercise I'd like you to try this week. For the next 7 days, pay attention to your automatic choices. Notice how you dress before leaving the house. Notice how you speak about money. Notice where your time goes. Don't judge yourself. Just observe. Because awareness is where transformation begins. Then ask yourself 3 questions every evening. Did my actions today reinforce the identity I want to build? Did my conversations reflect abundance or scarcity? Did I spend more time creating value than chasing small savings? Those questions may seem simple, but they begin rewiring your subconscious. Little by little, they shift your self-concept. And your self-concept is one of the strongest predictors of long-term behavior. You don't become wealthy because you suddenly have more money. You become wealthy because you consistently make decisions that align with the identity of someone who creates, manages, and grows value. Money is often the result, not the starting point. So if you've been waiting for your circumstances to change before you change, Try reversing the order. Become more intentional before life gives you a reason. Take care of yourself before you feel successful. Learn before you're forced to. Speak confidently about possibility instead of constantly rehearsing limitation. Protect your time like it's one of your greatest assets. Because it is. And perhaps the biggest lesson of all is this. Wealth begins long before the first big paycheck. It begins the moment your identity stops asking, "What can I afford today?" and starts asking, "Who am I becoming?" That single question has the power to influence your habits, your relationships, your career, your confidence, and ultimately, the reality you experience. Manifestation isn't about pretending your life is perfect. It's about intentionally becoming the person who is capable of creating a better one. And that transformation doesn't happen all at once. It happens one decision, one conversation, one habit, and one identity shift at a time. Because in the end, your future isn't built by occasional moments of motivation. It's built by the person you choose to become every single day. If this video helped you see manifestation differently, make sure to like the video, subscribe to Reality Rewire, and let me know in the comments, what's one small identity shift you're going to make starting today? Until next time, keep rewiring your reality, one thought, one habit, and one intentional choice at a time.